Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all of the praises and the glory to the Most High and His Son, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Rekah HaKwadash, and double honors to the head apostles of the great millstone, and as well as the elders too, Yahweh Bahashem, Shah, Brakatham, to the 144,000, and the rest of the body that believe in this ministry. And what I want to get into is something that will be taking place when Donald J. Trump gets in office, possibly, as it's looking very well promising that he's going to get in there. Joe Biden, as it already looks as well, he looks like he's on his way out. And what this article is saying is NATO threatens to collapse by 2025 over Ukraine disagreements, warns expert. NATO could collapse by 2025 due to growing contradictions between the positions of the U.S. Republican Party and the interests of most European countries on the conflict in Ukraine, writes Philip O'Brien, professor in the strategic studies, in an article. And I remember reading something to the equivalent of how Trump wants to disassociate himself or his country from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which, America being in conjunction of the EU makes the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So at that point, it'll just be the EU in this case, which ties in the prophecy, which is in the book of Revelations, the 17th chapter. And I'll get there when I get there. I want to read a little more of this article. So this reads, after praising NATO as the single most successful security grouping in modern global history, warns the bloc might collapse by 2025. The cause of this collapse would be the profound difference in outlook between the Republican Party's populist wing, which is led by Donald J. Trump, but now clearly makes up the majority of the GOP, and the existential security concerns of much of Europe. The immediate catalyst for the collapse would be the war in Ukraine, he wrote. Excuse me. According to the author, if the Republican Party wins the U.S. presidential election in 2024, the new administration may cease all support for Ukraine, which would ultimately divide the Atlantic Alliance, something European countries have not prepared for. If the pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian position in the Republican Party strengthens, European countries will have to do most of the work to support Kiev. And in addition, the leaders of the European countries need to prepare for a reality in which the U.S. gives up on NATO and strive to repair relations with Russia. Now, I read in the RT News on how I believe it was Germany and as well as some other European country, which is tagging along with Russia. And as well as what Donald J. Trump said when he was in office, he mentioned on how the Germans were getting their oil from Russia, which was a no-no in his book. So he was mad at I believe the guy's name is Stoltenberg. I forgot his first name, but he's like the head of the North. He's like the head of the EU, if I'm correct on that. And if I'm not correct, I'll put it in post production so you can see what he's the head of. But anyway, Donald J. Trump wasn't very happy about what the EU was doing. The members of the EU. That is. So what I want to do is I want to read the book of Revelations, and I want to just jump right to the point. Let me see something real quick. Maybe I can start with verse 7. Let's begin by reading verse 7. And the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carried her, which have the 7 heads and 10 horns. Verse 8, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, which is referring to the Roman system. And and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. And there here is the mind which have wisdom, 7 heads, and the 7 mountains are on which the woman sitteth. And all of these are European nations that the woman is sitting on. That's why it mentions that this beast descended out of the bottomless pit, meaning it came from Europe. The building back of this Roman system stemmed in within Europe. And then America basically tagged along with Europe back in the I think if I'm correct, the 40s. Back in, to be exact, 49. To go against the USSR at the time, which was beginning to grow in power on the eastern side. So in verse 10 it reads, and there are 7 kings, and 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh he must continue a short space. So the 5 that was fallen is the Greeks, Germania Minor, the Spanish, and as well as the Romans. So all that you have left, and Germania Major. So now all you have left is Spain and Rome. Okay, which in the Renaissance period, all of those people that resurrected the revival of Rome, which is what we have it today, was the Borgia family, which all of them descended out of Spain. As it is also mentioned in the book of Revelations, the 20th chapter, where it mentions that the beast was 1,000 years shut up in prison, and it was loose in his little season, meaning that when Jake was ruling, Jake already had these devils under submission. In other words, we have these Edomites in slavery ever since the time period of the from the time of when you had the western part of Rome rising above the eastern part of Rome, which the eastern part of Rome were Edomites, and the western part of Rome were like a mixture. You had Edomites, but primarily more Jakes were ruling that side of Rome at the time, and that part of Rome became more successful than the eastern part of Rome, and then you had many other prominent Israelite figures that rose in the power seat throughout the centuries. And Jake really became prominent around the 4th century, during the time of when you had the founding fathers of Christianity, when they were on the scene around 325 AD and onwards. And ever since that point towards the 13 to 1400s, that's when Esau came back into the power. And that was the same period in time when you had the bubonic plague, which I believe that Amalekites around that time had something to do with that. That's just my personal thing in history, But yeah, it was around that time period, around 1,000 years straight, that we had these devils in slavery in the realms of Europe. And then eventually Esau came up little into the power seat. Now let's go and read this again. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space, which would include, if I'm correct, Britain. Okay, because during I think if I'm correct, before the Second World War, if I'm correct. And if I'm wrong, somebody can post a comment on the comment board. Prior before the Second World War, the British pound was the world reserve currency at the time. If I'm right or wrong, or it could very well be World War One. Prior before World War One, America didn't have the dollar as the world reserve currency. It was basically England at the time. As well as it's written that the 7th brought forth the 8th horn, which goeth into perdition. So in verse 11 this reads, and the beast that was and is not, which is Rome, he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. I didn't even see that. So yeah, that would be Britain. Okay, so in verse 10, the one that which would come to continue in a short space. So now let's read verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings of 1 hour with the beast. And the 10 are Belgium, Denmark, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Greece, Spain, England, Germany, which was the European Union, which was established in 58. And to properly go into these names, because I don't have the list of the names with me. I get into this chapter, I'll have those other names listed, but they had their ancient names, their ancient Roman names, so to speak, like the Visigoths and the likes, etc., etc. So let's continue on and read. What is it? Verse 13. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So now what we're going to do is going to jump all the way down to the point. And it's verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So this is just the beginning of that, because they're saying that during Trump's administration, there could very well be a breakup of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. All right. So what I'm going to do before I go any further, I want to try and find that precept that I by accidentally deleted. So let me do this. Let me see what I can do. Let me go to history. Okay, so I got Revelation 17, Revelation 13, Genesis 27, Revelation 6. So now what I need to do, I need to get the book of Mark 14 and 50. Yeah, this is it right here. So now let me go back and let's move on forward. Because the thing of it is, these devils are ruling by the sword. And by the sword, they will be destroyed. So let me read the book of Revelations, the 6th chapter now. And we are going to read verse 4. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword, just as it is mentioned in the book of Revelation 17, how these shall hate the whore. In other words, those that were once upon a time joined to the whore. And we can also include the Russians too, because they're all Edomites anyway. This is the dominion of Esau from the east to west. You got them Russians over there, and as well as you got the Americans on the left-hand side, and they're all ruling in great power. And they're all ruling with the same blessing, which is the sword. So it's going to take the sword to destroy both of these great superpowers altogether. So this is what John the Revelator is seeing. He's seeing that these Edomites are going missile for missile right along with their allies. Okay? And that's why it reads, and there was given unto him a great sword, which goes into the blessing in the book of Genesis, chapter 27 and 39. We're going to begin there and read verse 40. And Isaac his father answered his son unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shalt thou live and serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. So that's the great sword that Esau would rule with, as it is mentioned in the book of Revelations, and especially verse 4 in this case. That great sword is basically indicative of the weapons of mass destruction which these devils would invent beginning with Albert Einstein and as well as J. Robert Oppenheimer. And he mentioned that he's become the destroyer of worlds, which is one of his sayings, which is known today. In the book of Mark 14, and what is it, we'll begin by reading verse 46, because we know that Peter got a bit carnal because of what was going on at the time of Yahushua, and Peter basically took his hands out and took out his sword to cut the ear off of the high priest, as it is mentioned over here. And as it goes as far as to read, and one of them that stood by drew a sword and smote a servant of the high priest to cut off his ear. And Yahushua answered and said unto them, are you come out as against a thief with the swords and staves to take me? Now, I got the wrong precept because Yahushua made a statement. This is it's actually in Matthew 26, to be exact, in verse 51. If my memory serves me correctly, there was a saying that he gave. And this was it right here. Then said Yahushua unto him, put up again thy sword into his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Exactly. And that's very well applying to Esau, even though it didn't apply to Esau per se, because it was really Yahushua telling Peter, look, you don't need to get carnal like that. This can also be applied to Esau, because as it is also mentioned in the book of Revelations 13, 9 and 10 as well, it says this, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity, and he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. And here is the patience of the faith of the saints. So we know that Esau has been very well instrumental with the sword and getting whatever he wanted. Whether he had to slaughter, a large majority of a particular nation, which we know that he slaughtered the Native American Indians by getting America by ill-gotten gain, and as well as forcing us against our will to be taken into hardcore slavery, and as well as the sword came upon us even yet and still, even though we were submitted to this devil still used the sword against us. So now, with all of that being the case, the sword is going to what? Come up at the same sword, the same level of wrath that he have showed to the world. It's going to come upon his own pate. So let me see if I can find that as well. Excuse me. Yeah, this is it right here. Exactly. Psalm 7 and 16. The Spirit is moving. His mischief shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down upon his own pate. Verse 17. I will praise the Lord Yahweh according to his righteousness, and I will sing praise to the name of the Lord of the Most High. Yeah, and that's what we're going to do when we're delivered out of here. We're going to sing the praises of the Lord. That's in the book of Revelations 15 and 1. When we're delivered scarcely from the destruction, we're going to be afraid, and as well as we're going to be rejoicing at the same time and praising the Lord that we were delivered. All right. So yeah, all of this wrath and destruction that Esau has brought upon the earth is going to come right upon him. And that's pretty much all I have to say over here. And with this European Union, and as well as the American connection with them, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, by 2025, as this article is called ifinfobricks.org.com, and they're posting this. So as well as the BRICS are coming together, and then you have an additional nations being added to this conglomeration of nations, you have the breaking up, or the possibility of a breaking up in the future of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is all prophecy, as I've already explained, especially in the book of Revelations 17. So the allies of America, as well as it reads in the book of Obadiah, they that have of eaten thy bread have laid a wound under thee. Just another scripture to add. I'm just quoting it, but I'm not going to bring it on out. Yeah, so that's pretty much it right there, man. With all of that, I want to give all of the praises and the glory to the Most High and his Son, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai Ba'ashem Rakah HaKwadash, and Yahweh Ba'ashem Shai Brakatham to all that are in His truth, 144,000 and 1/3. And that's all I have to say. Shalom.